want to just share this morning, the theme of our service today is walk a mile in my shoes. And I love this quote from a Clarence Buddington Kelland, and says this: "My father didn't tell me how to live, he lived and let me watch him do it." Isn't that cool? My father didn't tell me how to live, he lived and let me watch him do it. And I know you've heard me say this over and over again, but dads, how many of you know, whether you like it or not, your kids are watching you? They absolutely are. And one of the things that I do want to do today, we're not only wanting to honor fathers, but I do just want to take a moment to honor all our single mums who have to be mum and dad and just do an amazing job. And we just really do honor you guys today. Story was told, and you might have heard me say this once before, but of a father that had been drinking at the pub, and like a bad father, he had his son wait for him at the pub while he drunk. And afterwards, he got so drunk that he comes staggering home and says, "Come on, son, let's go home." And he's sort of like this, and he's all over, had way too much to drink. And as he's walking along, he stops and he looks back and he sees the son doing this. And he says, "Son, what are you doing?" And the little boy looks at his dad. He says, "Dad, I'm just walking in your footsteps." How many of you know, whether we like it or not, our kids will follow? In fact, can I say this? There's two scenarios usually that happens with kids, but especially as we grow up and we become parents, there's usually two scenarios. The first scenario is this, is we will either react or we will respond to the way our parents have raised us. You see, some people react and they say, "I will never ever do what my parents did or what my dad did. I hated the way he did this, I hated the way he did. I will never do that." And he will react to that, or we will react to that. The second thing is we will respond, where we say, "I love the way my dad did that. I love this about it. I love that attribute. I love the way he did this or he did that." And we will choose to follow and keep his example. Do you know Jesus, when he came and he went out and he began to call the disciples, he said those words in Matthew 4:19. He called out to them and he said, "Come and follow me." How many of you know, as dads, we get people to follow us, don't we? Our kids are going to follow in our footsteps. I think one of the most powerful propositions that we can put to people, especially our children, is the words of Paul that's found in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 1, and it says this: "Follow my example as I follow the example of Christ." One of the reasons I chose this theme was because, do you know, over the years, I can't tell you how many times I've heard it said from dads and mums, but dads, "I am so glad Jesus rescued me. I am so glad that God arrested my attention. God drew me into his loving kindness. I experienced the amazing grace." And so many people have said, "If it wasn't for God, I don't know where my family would be today. I don't know where I would be. I don't know where my marriage would be. I would hate to think where my kids would be today if it wasn't for God." Nothing greater than the Christian testimony. Nothing greater when we can stand as dads and say, "Hey, don't just follow my example, but hopefully follow my example as I follow the example of Christ." You know, one of the things that we see as pastors, and every one of us will experience it in life, when we see generational things that go from generation to generation, cycles, whether it's cycles of addiction and cycles of abuse and cycles of poverty and anger and jealousy or negativity. And you see, often it just gets passed from generation to generation. And one of the things that I love about the Christian life, it's something that forces us to stop and take a look and say, hey, the way the past was, it doesn't have to continue with my family. I can stop right now, and I might not be brilliant, I may not be perfect, I may not get it all right, but today I want to turn around and I want to start a new cycle. And I love it when you look at Christian homes and Christian families where you've seen that, you've heard the testimonies of how it was in the past, and then you look at the grace of God. And I would love to say, you know, we all get it right 100% of the time. We don't. I don't know if we get it right 80% or 70%. But I'm just so glad somewhere along in our lives we said, hey, this has got to stop. This has got to change. One of the things that I have discovered about kids is if they're left unchecked, they'll usually go further than you went. And so, you know, one of the greatest things, and I love this, is that we get to make a change. And something that I've discovered, that change not only affects our kids, but it'll affect our children's children and the generations to come. I honestly believe parenting is both one of the greatest privileges, but it's also one of the greatest responsibilities. And if I can ask you dads, and if I can ask you parents today, how many of you have discovered the goal was not to raise kids? The goal was to raise responsible adults. I've discovered as a grandparent especially, it's easy to raise kids. I love it when I have the kids. I've just got to keep them fed and keep them entertained. And as long as I do that well, I'm going good. But how many of you know as parents, the goal is not just to look after them for a while. It's not just to entertain them, not just to feed them. It's not to raise kids. Our goal is to raise responsible adults that are going to put something in the community, have an effect into community. The other thing is we're not only raising responsible adults, but we're raising spiritual adults. Hopefully that as they follow us, as we follow Christ, that they're going to be able to say one day to their kids, hey, follow me as I follow Jesus. Proverbs chapter 22, verse 6, you know, well, the Passion Translation, it says this, dedicate your children to God and point them in the way that they should go, and the values they've learned from you will be with them for life. Can I just say this, parents? You cannot determine the choices they make, but what you can do is point them in the right direction. What you can do is give them every opportunity to know God. There's some decisions that they will do and some things that they will get into. You will not choose for them. They will make their own decisions. But as a parent, and while we've got opportunity, we get to point them in the right direction. We get to instill into them the values that we've learned. So hopefully that they will be with them for life. Can I give you today, just as a dad, as a parent, 3 keys, and then we'll get stuck into some fruit. Is that okay? 3 keys. Whether you're a dad, whether you're a parent, whether you're a grandparent. I'm loving being a grandparent. I keep saying this to people. If I knew how good it was being a grandparent, I would have had my grandkids first. They are awesome. Number 1, first key is this. As a parent, as a dad, as a father, as a grandfather, grandparent, number 1, be somebody that adds value. I don't know if you've ever been to a fast food shop, but they trained. They're good at it. I keep falling for it every time. You go to buy a burger and they say, hey, would you like fries with that? And what they're doing is trying to add value. They're trying to upsize you. Would you like large fries? Would you like a drink with that? And they're constantly trying to get you to buy something else. They're constantly trying to add value. I think the worst one these days are the petrol stations. You go in to buy petrol. Petrol, please. Thank you. Bowser number 3. Would you like a drink with that? Would you like a coffee or a cold drink? Actually, I would. I'm a little bit parched. I think I will. I'll grab a drink. Then you're just about to walk off and they go, hey, do you realize $3.50 for a drink, but if you buy 2 drinks, it'll only be an extra 50 cents. But I can't drink 2 drinks. I know, but it's good value. Well, if it's good value, maybe I should be a good steward of my money. And you're just about to walk off and they go, excuse me, but if you buy 2 drinks, for an extra 50 cents, you'll get a chocolate bar. And before you know it, you just walked in there for petrol. And now you got chocolates, and now you got waters, and now you got drinks. They love and they taught, and they taught how to upsell, how to add value. Do you know, as parents, one of the greatest opportunities we have is to be able to add value to our kids. It's easy to pull them down, easy to scold them and tell them off and embarrass them and do all of that. But I want to tell you, it takes skill to add value into their lives. Mark chapter 10, verse 42. Jesus called them together and he says, you know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials and exercise authority over them. Verse 43, not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to be great, who wants to be great? 2 of you. Whoever wants to be great, who wants to be great? Must be your servant. How many of you know God got the whole thing and twisted it upside and put it on its head? And he said the world loves to be in charge. They love to exercise authority. And how many of you know there's times as parents we've got to exercise authority? But I want to tell you, one of the greatest things you can do as well is learn to serve your kids. Just say, hey, you know, we're always asking them, hey, can you help me do this? And can you help me do that? And can you fix this? And we're always asking them to do something. But how often do we stop and say, hey, can I help you? What can I do to serve you today? What can I do to encourage you? And we need to be looking for opportunities to add value to their lives, looking for opportunities to encourage, looking for opportunities to build them up, looking for opportunities to edify them. Do you know, they say that for every negative thing that's spoken over a child, it takes 8 positive things. And how many of you know at school, at play, all over the place, kids are copying negativity all the time. So we've got to look for opportunities where we can edify and build up. I love the word edify. It literally paints a picture of a bricklayer where he's building a wall and he takes one brick and he puts the cement to make sure it holds, and he adds a brick and then he adds another brick and he adds one more brick. How many of you know when you add value in a kid's life, you're instilling things into their life, you're adding things into their life that are going to bless them for the future. It's easy to spot flaws and faults. But imagine if every dad could just look for opportunities. Where can I add value? As parents, where can we add value into our kids' lives? In Psalm 103, you know well, and I'm going to read from the Message Bible. Psalm 139 says, I thank you, high God. You're breathtaking, body and soul. I am marvelously made. Turn to somebody and say, I'm marvelously made. Didn't sound convincing. I worship in adoration. What a creation. You know me inside and out. You know every bone in my body. You know exactly how I was made. Bit by bit, I was sculptured from nothing into something. Verse 16. Like an open book, you watched me grow from conception to birth. All the stages of my life were spread out before you. The days of my life are prepared before I even lived one day. How many of you as parents had plans for your kids? How many of you understand God's got a plan for your kids? God's got a destiny. God's got a purpose. God's put potential in every child. God has given every child an assignment. God has put within every child gifts and talents that we as parents are able to try and harness and hone them for the glory of God. So one day their lives will be fruitful in the kingdom of God. One of the greatest things you can learn to do is to add value to their life. Instead of trying to be the king of the castle, and sometimes dads are good at that, aren't they? Some mums are good at that. Instead of trying to be the king of the castle, what about taking moments where you can be the servant? Say, hey, how can I help? How can I add value to their life? How can I serve your destiny? Because greatness in God's eyes is not lording it over them, but it's serving and strengthening and harnessing their potential. Could you imagine what our kids would be like if we just learned every day, just like that McDonald's person, just like the worker at BP, that we learn to every time we get the opportunity. We say, how can I just take a moment to add value into my kids? Maybe it's teach them a skill, develop a talent. Maybe get them to use their God-given gifts. If we're going to raise responsible adults, then we need to learn to take a moment as often as we can. It might not be every day, but as often as we can. Teach them about responsibility. Teach them about the things of God. Teach them to pray. Teach them godly values and standards. Teach them about the Word of God. Look for opportunities to add value. The second thing is just be present. The number one rule in life, they say, is this: wherever you are, that's where you need to be. How many of you know sometimes we're so good and we're doing 101 things, our mind's spinning at 1,000,000 miles and the kids are sitting there. I notice it so much with grandkids. In fact, my grandkids now, they just, Granddad, 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 and they just keep screaming. You know, it's easy to get caught up and they can be there, but we're not present. We're in the same room or in the same house, but we're not always present. We need to learn to be present. Hebrews 13:5 says, don't be obsessed with money, but live content with what you have. For you always have God's presence. I love that. How many of you know He's the ever-present God? For hasn't He promised, I will never leave you alone, never, and I'll never loosen my grip on your life. Isn't that interesting? I found, just as I thought about that God tied money and presence together. Because, you know, often with families, one of the things that we see in life, especially with, you know, successful people, often they're working long, long hours. They're so busy trying to earn the dollar, they've got no time to be present. And God says, hey, don't worry about that, because I want to be the ever-present God. I think one of the greatest challenges we can have in life is one of the challenges, we're so often trying to pay for the dreams and pay for our kids' future, that sometimes we miss the present. We miss that moment. Somebody said this, and it's so true. Because sadly, that most people spend their lives either trying to repair the past, fix the things that we did wrong, or we're so busy trying to prepare for the future, we don't get to live in the now. We don't get to just be there. I think it's great when we have Father's Day and Mother's Day and special days when we do just get to stop and hopefully, hopefully for everybody else, you can bless your dads or bless your mums when it's Mother's Day. But how many of you know we should need to take every day where we just learn to stop, learn to be present in the situation? We can get so busy trying to fix all our bad mistakes or planning for the future, and one day everything's going to be brilliant, or one day, or if we can just get this and we can just get that and we can just build that and we can save for this whole. Sometimes we're so busy planning for the future we miss the present. If we live our lives like that, we often miss out on the incredible moments. You know, I've said this before and I'll say it again. Our kids don't always need your attention 24 hours a day. They don't even need it 12 hours a day. You know, unless you're going on a holiday, block time out. But you know, one of the greatest things you can do is if you get 15 minutes with them, be present in that 15 minutes. If you get 30 minutes with them, be present in that 30 minutes. Whatever time you get, take those moments, snatch those moments, and just be there in those moments. I don't know about you, but especially for me, in preparing messages, and then yesterday I had the privilege, Cooper slept over Friday night, and he was coming to help, and he loves building things and loves doing stuff. And he goes, "Granddad, do you want to help me build something?" And I thought, here's a moment. Let me be in the present. Let me do. So I said to him, "Cooper, what are you going to build?" He says, "I don't know." I says, "Well, you need a plan." "I don't know." I said, "Well, what are you thinking?" He said, "Can I borrow your chainsaw?" I said, "You're not borrowing the chainsaw." And I can see his little mind. He goes, "Can I borrow your grinder?" "You're not borrowing the grinder. If you need something ground, I'll grind it, I'll cut it, but you're not using the grinder. I will help you. What are you wanting to grind? What do you want?" "I don't know." "Oh, well, maybe I'll just build it out of wood." "Great, what are you going to build out of wood?" And I don't know about you, but I can feel myself getting anxious. I like to have a plan. I like to know what we're building. And he just sort of looks around and, "Oh, can I borrow that bit of wood?" And, "Oh, can I get those screws?" And he's amazing. He builds these amazing things. So he gets 2 bits of wood and he says, "Granddad, have you got any hinges?" I said, "What are you building?" "I don't know." "Why do you need hinges?" I'm trying to be there present with them. I'm getting agitated. "Where are we going to put this hinge?" "I just want to screw. I want them to go like this, Granddad." I said, "All right, I'll get a hinge." So I find a hinge. We screw them in, and let's go. "What are you going to do now?" "Can I have that bit of wood there? Can you cut that for me, Granddad?" So he cuts this bit of wood, and then he finds an electric switch that I've got. He says, "Can I have this electric switch?" "What do we build?" "I don't know." So he takes this electric switch and he nails it on, and he drills a hole, and he says, I went off for him, and he goes, "Can I borrow your black paint, Granddad?" I said, "Yeah, go for it." So I said, "Just do it outside." So he does. Come back a little while, he goes, "Look what I've built, Granddad. I've built a laptop computer that opens up. It's got an on and off switch on it. It's got a," and I go, "Mate, that's awesome." But part of me, I'm getting agitated. I'm saying, "Tell me the plan." How many of you know sometimes we just need to be there in the moment? Be there in the present. I appreciate as dads, we often work all day, work hard, and when we get home, we just want to sit down, gain control of this remote control, and just unwind after a busy day. But can I encourage you, dads, doesn't have to be every day, but look for those moments where you can just be in the present. When they need a hand, when they're doing something. My kids or grandkids always come over. The first thing they want to do is play footy. That's why I'm excited as men. We're playing touch rugby because I only have to play for 3 minutes and I can tag out. But they would play all day. And I'm running around. All right, that's just about me done. I want to be there in the present. And it might mean just to learn to factor in times during the week where we can spend that quality time, having fun doing added value things. Kids need our time and attention if they're going to thrive, but they need you to be there. We need to add value. We need to be in the present. And the last one is this. As dads, I believe we need to lead well. Somebody said this, sow a thought. Stephen Covey it was. Sow a thought, you reap an action. Sow an action, you reap a habit. Sow a habit, you reap a character. Sow a character, you reap a destiny. How many of you know it's not the big challenges in life, it's the little things that we do that help to build our kids daily. And it's in the way that we get to lead them. It's in the habits you set in your life and for your family that will have the greatest impact upon their lives. Ephesians 6:4 in the Message Bible, it says, fathers, don't exasperate your children by coming down hard on them. Take them by the hand and lead them in the way of the Master. Isn't that a beautiful picture? Because sometimes as dads, I know what it's like. I have been one. I am one. It's easy sometimes just to get on their case, isn't it? Telling them what to do. And I love that picture that the Message Bible paints. Take them by the hand. Lead them in the way of the Master. And not only as dads, not only as parents, but how many of you know, even as grandparents, we get to do that today. We get that wonderful privilege. And I get to pastor one day a week, or not one day a week, but I get to pastor in this setting one day a week. But how many of you know as dads, you get to pastor every day of the week? You get to shepherd your kids every single day. Psalm 23 says, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in paths of righteousness for His name's sake. What a beautiful picture of the Good Shepherd. And how many of you know as parents we get to be good shepherds as well to our children and to our kids? Do you know something I've learned about leadership and leading? If you don't lead in their life, somebody else will. If you don't take the position of the shepherd, somebody else will try and shepherd them. Somebody else, it might be the television, it might be their school teacher, it might be their friends. How many of you know, parents, we have a great opportunity to be a good shepherd to our kids. If we're not the primary influencer, somebody else will. I picked this theme, walk a mile in my shoes, because whether we realize it or not, they're watching. Whether we realize it or not, they will imitate what we do. And when they get older, they'll decide, love that, hated that, love that. And they'll get to choose how they parent their kids. Let's give them things that they go, I love that about mum and dad. Love that about my parents. We get to lead them into healthy pastures. We get to lead them into quiet waters. You know, I didn't realize, but one of the huge issues today is stress amongst young children. Just anxiety. With everything going on in the world, I think Pastor Alison shared even with our grandkids, and you know, just talking about COVID, and the youngest one, or one said he was really concerned. The youngest one said, well, I hope I don't die. How many of you know there's a lot of anxiety out there? We've got to be able to lead them in a quiet, still, peaceful waters. We get to lead them in paths of righteousness. We get to lead them in right paths. We really do live in a crazy, mixed up world where the morals and the values of society has really been turned upside down and shaken all over. But dads, especially as Christian dads, we get to lead them in right paths. Dads, can I encourage you today? Lead your kids well. Young Craig and Renee, look at that. Little Bubs is about to pop any minute. But one thing I know about parenting is they grow up so quick. They grow up so fast, and before you know it, they'll be off your hands. And, we get a season to lead them. We get a season to add value. We get a season to be present. We get a season to lead. Wow.